He's ever muted.
I'm here.
I'm
There
here.
she is. Okay. Welcome, Queenie.
All righty, let's go ahead and get started. And as you all know, Walter cannot join us this evening. And Gretchen and Ellen cannot join it this evening too. So I'll chair the meeting, and David Levine's going to serve as my co-chair for the opening script issues. So let's take it from there. Good evening, everyone. To conduct this meeting wholly electronically and to effectuate both the emergency procedures authorized by FOIA and the emergency ordinance, the Mount Vernon District SSPA Task Force needs to make certain findings and determinations for the record. First, because each member of the task force is participating in this meeting from a separate location, we must verify that a quorum of members is participating and that each member's voice is clear, audible, and at an appropriate volume for all of the other members. Accordingly, I'm going to conduct a roll call and ask each task force member participating in this meeting to state your name and the location from which you are participating. I ask that each of you pay close attention to ensure that you can hear each of your colleagues. Following this roll call, we will vote to establish that every member can hear every other member. First, Tim Sargent, chairing this evening. I'm at my home in the Mount Vernon district. Next, Catherine Ward.
I'm at home at my house on Gladstone Place.
All righty. Lynn Pasco.
I'm at home at my place in Montebello.
All right. Gretchen is not with us this evening. Tracy Wood. Is Tracy with us this evening? Did somebody hear her? I guess.
No, I don't see Tracy.
Okay. Queenie Cox.
Oh, I'm here in Gum Springs.
All righty. Mary Payton. Mary, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here at home in Mount Vernon district.
All righty. Holly Doherty. Holly. Okay.
I don't see Holly.
All righty. Hamid Munir. Right.
Also
Hamid, are
absent.
you with us?
No.
Okay. Hillary Clausen.
I'm here at my home on Mason Neck.
All righty. David Levine.
Dave Levine calling from my home in the city of Alexandria.
All righty. Evan Kaufman.
I'm here calling in from Richmond.
Okay, Evan. And Ellen Young. And Ellen is also absent this evening. Okay. At this point, I'll pass the virtual gavel to my co-chairman, David Levine, so that I may be heard to make the requisite motion. I move that each member's voice may be adequately heard by each other member of the Mount Vernon District SSPA Task Force.
Okay, I note the motion and request a second to the motion from a member of the task force.
Second.
Who was that? I'm sorry.
Well, Catherine or Evan.
Catherine. Okay. All in favor, say aye, or opposed, say nay.
Aye.
Hi.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. And
All
the
right.
motion, this is the motion verifying audibility of members' voices.
Okay, our next motion is need for an electronic meeting. Second, having established that each member's voice may be heard by every other member, we must next establish the nature of the emergency that compels the emergency procedures, the fact that we are meeting electronically, what type of electronic communication is being used, and how we have arranged for public access to this meeting. Therefore, I move that the state of emergency caused by the COVID-19 pandemic makes it unsafe for the task force to physically assemble and unsafe for the public to physically attend any such meeting, and that as such, FOIA's usual procedures, which require the physical assembly of the task force and the physical presence of the public, cannot be implemented safely or practically. I further move that the task force may conduct this meeting electronically through a dedicated video and audio conferencing line, and that the public may access this meeting by registering through the meeting link on the Track a Plan Amendment page of the SSPA website, which is www.fairfaxcounty.gov/planning-development/plan amendments /south/south/track-plan-amendment, or by calling 1-844-621-3956, TTY is 711, and entering the access code. And it is so moved.
Okay, I note the motion and request a second to the motion.
Second.
Okay, thank you, Lynn. I'll now ask for all in favor to say aye or opposed to say nay.
Aye.
I,
Anybody opposed? Okay, hearing none, the motion passes.
All right. Finally, it is next required that all of the matters addressed on today's agenda must address the emergency itself, are necessary for continuity in Fairfax County government, and are statutorily required or necessary to continue operations and the discharge of the Mount Vernon District SSPA Task Force's lawful purposes, duties, and responsibilities, and it is so moved.
I note the motion and request a second to the motion.
second, this is Hillary.
Okay, Hillary, thank you. Now I'll ask everyone in favor to say aye or opposed to say nay.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, anyone opposed? Okay, hearing none, the motion passes.
Okay, thank you. Finally, it's time to open the public meeting, and like to note whether there are any provided written comments in advance. I'll ask staff for that clarification. Do we have anything in writing ahead of the time?
We did. We received 2 comments. One was from one of the task force members, and it was some comments that I'd be happy to summarize since she's not here later on when we kind of get into the text. And then we also received some comments from Mr. Vianney, who's a land use attorney on the call, who works with Stout and Teague regarding the plan text, which is other people.
Great. Okay. So we'll discuss those at the appropriate. Okay. And finally, want to note whether anybody has signed up in advance to speak. Do we have anybody who wants to speak during the meeting? Do we have any list or anybody on the agenda?
No list, no.
Yeah, no list.
Okay.
But if you're a member of the public and you'd like to speak, you could just raise your hand, and we'd be happy to call on you at the appropriate time.
Okay, great. All right, thank you. With that, I'm going to turn it over to staff to begin the agenda for tonight's discussion. Please take it away.
All right, well, thank you, Commissioner Sargent, and good to see you all again. It is, like Catherine was saying on the call, all of a sudden the heavens opened up, and so we're hopefully getting some good rain for the plants. We are tonight going to be going over the initial draft of the straw man. The straw man is just a kind of a planner speak, so to speak, for draft plan text for the Huntington Metro Station plan amendment, which we've been working on over the past year. And so this is very much an initial discussion. This is the initial draft of plan text that staff has developed. And it hopefully what you'll see is that it's responded to the discussion that we've had since we kind of initiated this in earnest last summer with the task force. It also reflects discussions that we've had, of course, with WMATA and county agencies. So hopefully what you're seeing is kind of aligning with kind of the general direction that we've had and the tenor of the meetings that we've had thus far. This is very much not intended to be a point of decision. There are no decisions to be made. This is a meeting where we can look at the text, and I'm planning to go through the text to give structure to the meeting. But this is a time to hear your comments, hear what you have in terms of your reactions to it, whether this is kind of aligning in terms of your priorities for the plan amendment. And so what we can do is go through the plan text, go section by section. I don't think we necessarily need to go word by word at this point, given that it's still relatively fresh text, but there will be an opportunity and time both during the meeting as well as after the meeting to provide written feedback and further conversations. So it's very much not the end and very much not the last opportunity to comment. This is very much the beginning. So Catherine.
I have maybe an unrelated question, but we had a really good presentation by your contracting consultants the last time we got together, particularly about Huntington Avenue and some opportunities to make it a really charming street. Is that playing into this text at all, or how is that going to work out?
Absolutely. We can talk to that because there's a very specific answer to that. And one of the things that we'll want to do is walk through exactly what we anticipate incorporating from that study as it relates to the Huntington Metro Station site, and then what would be things that would be would need to be looked at beyond the scope of this particular study. So, but we can go into that when we talk about multimodal connectivity in particular. All right. And so what I was hoping we could do is, let me just pull this up really quickly. I was hoping we could do, if this sounds good to you, is kind of, I'll do a very brief presentation, kind of outlining where we are and where the SSPA process fits in for this particular site, which is within Land Unit E, and what we're actually going about changing as a part of this comprehensive plan amendment in terms of this initial strawman text. And then following that, as you've seen from the plan text, if you've been able to read it, is that it's got several sections. It starts with land use and then quickly goes into urban design, multimodal circulation, environmental considerations, et cetera. And so I'm hoping that what we can do is have a brief overview of each section and then and then have a discussion about that particular section, the things that the task force is prioritizing, the text that they would like to see added, things that they think have issues that need to be explored further. And then that way we will know within each section what we should do in terms of producing potential revisions for the next round when we come back. So as I mentioned, the goals for this evening are really to review and to consider changes both for the whole of the document as well as the specific details within each section. We will synthesize the comments that we receive into a revised draft and distribute it prior to the next task force meeting. Our next task force meeting is for June the 21st. Right now, that is the only planned task force meeting that we have on the agenda right now. So one of the things that we've not discussed in the past, but if we need it, I wanted to flag that we may, if the task force would like to have additional time to consider this, we may need to add an additional date. And so I'm just throwing these up here now. We don't need to make a decision tonight. But if needed, we're looking at potentially going and doing one additional meeting later on in the month if needed. All right, so this will be familiar for most of you, but one of the things that we can start with is just where does the Huntington Metro Station fit into the context of the comprehensive plan? So in terms of our comprehensive plan, in our area plans, as y'all know, kind of the Mount Vernon Supervisory District and the Lee District, generally speaking, as well as some additional areas kind of on the western side of the I-95, are located within Area 4. This is the fourth area plan. There's four area plans within the comprehensive plan that provide area-specific guidance for long-range planning. Within Area 4, the area that you see directly to the north is what's known as the Mount Vernon Planning District. So that's not coterminous with the Supervisory District. It's in reference to an area on both sides of Richmond Highway and provides general guidance for how this area of the county should develop in the future. Within that, you have kind of these Russian dolls, kind of nested recommendations. You have the Huntington Transit Station area, and that's the area that's most proximate to the metro station and influenced by the metro station. Within even that, you have a further guidance, which we'll get to in a second, which is the transit development area, and that's the area, generally speaking, that's planned for the highest levels of and concentrations of urban redevelopment in line with transit-oriented policies. And then our site in particular is located in the general region of the STAR, which is, of course, Land Unit E, and encompasses the majority of Land Unit E. So one thing that I'll note, we are making changes in the draft that you'll see in the PDF that I had sent out on Saturday that are editorial in nature for the area in orange, the transit station area, and the Land Unit E guidance. Those are editorial changes just to reflect changes that need to take place to reflect existing conditions and some of the changes that are taking place within the Land Unit E guidance. But the vast majority of the changes that are policy, or actually all of the changes that are policy in nature, relate to land unit E and the WMATA site in particular. So before we get into the weeds, thought we'd step back for just a second and see what does the adopted comprehensive plan say, kind of in a nutshell, for the transit station area, the area that we have subject to our plan amendment. So as you all know, the Huntington Metro Station site, the WMATA site, is planned for public facilities associated with the metro station and bus rapid transit. The adopted text has an adopted redevelopment option, which has been partially implemented today. And it's for mixed use transit-oriented development in the area south of the station in what's known as land units E and F. And so that option has a redevelopment potential of 850 residential units. All of these are either built or under construction. So that's Abington, the courts at Huntington, and the pavilions at Huntington. In addition to those residential units which have been implemented or are being implemented now, there is an adopted option for 250,000 square feet of office and 30,000 square feet of retail use, which have not been built. The majority of the text beyond these specific recommendations for land use relate to urban and building design, multimodal transportation elements, affordable housing, environmental considerations, the kinds of things that reflect countywide policy in some regards, but in others respond specifically to the site and the specific situations and circumstances that would enable and enhance the type of land use plan that you see here and that's quantified here. So that's the adopted comprehensive plan. There is a redevelopment option today. It's been partially implemented. All of the implementation has been residential. So the draft plan text that we're looking at today, the straw man, so to speak, here in a nutshell, retains kind of a base plan, which is public facilities associated with the metro station and the BRT. It revises the option, provides a new option for mixed use redevelopment in the areas both south and north of the station, solely in land unit E. And there's a specific reason for doing that. As requested with the authorization, as the maximum for the study, the option would provide 1,500 new units. So this is in addition to the 850 that are planned and implemented within land units E and F. So we're looking at an additional increase of 1,500 net new units as the maximum development potential. In addition to that 1,500 net new units, there'd be 132,000 square feet of net new non-residential uses. So that's office, retail, service, education uses, et cetera. And this is in addition to the planned 280,000 square feet. So a new total, which I'll show in just a little while, reflecting the total non-residential development potential. And then like what we have with the adopted plan recommendation, there are recommendations related to urban and building design, multimodal transportation, affordable housing, and environmental considerations. All right, so on to the text. Land unit E is the area that's shown here. And so this is the pedestrian circulation map, for example, and also provides the land unit, existing land unit boundaries, and shows exactly where land unit E is and in relation to land unit F and the surroundings. So the metro station today is fully on the land unit E parcel. In addition to the two main parcels that make up the WMATA site, our study area has also included the small, very small teardrop shaped parcel right here, which we refer to kind of offhand as the remnant parcel. And that's been included in the study area. And so the beginning of the plan text goes over the existing uses on the site, which is the metro station. The 379 units of Abington development is located in this section right here, and it's just noted in the land unit guidance that has been approved and is now currently under construction. This section also notes what's also been approved on the site today, which is the 250,000 square feet of office and the 25,000 square feet of retail, which would implement the vast majority of the adopted plan text, but has not been constructed today. So these maps, we're working to update the maps as we speak to show and illustrate a lot of this plan text. We didn't have them in time for this evening's discussion, but we'll get them to you as soon as we're able to. So into kind of a more in-depth discussion of land unit E. The way that we've kind of organized our thinking on the land unit is that it's defined by two general areas, the northern portion and the southern portion. So That northern portion is the area that's kind of most influenced by Huntington Avenue. Has existing kiss and ride lot, transit stops, has an entrance to Metro, structured parking, etc. And then the southern portion is primarily accessed from North Kings Highway, contains surface kiss and ride lot, transit stops, and entrance to the Metro station, as well as a structured parking garage. Any questions before we get into the option? This has all been kind of just background and fairly general description of what we have on the site today, but I want to make sure before we proceed any further, if there are any questions. All right. Okay. And so this is the transit-oriented mixed-use development option. So this is the primary kind of element of the site-specific recommendation that we've been working on. So in addition to the planned public facilities, as an option, transit-oriented mixed-use development with the following mix of uses is recommended for the parcels that are subject to the study area. So that's the 3 WMATA parcels as well as the remnant parcel. So the grand total is 382,000 square feet of non-residential uses. So that's inclusive of office, retail, education, community service uses, and the types of housing accommodations that are regulated as either health care uses or medical uses, such as assisted living, CCFs, continuing care facilities, etc. Within that 382,000, there is general flexibility with regards to where it should be located. One thing that we think, though, is very important is ensuring that both phases of development, so you have that northern phase and the southern phase, has that type of mixed-use environment within each of those phases. And so this recommendation provides 20,000 square feet of ground floor non-residential uses as a minimum in the southern phase and 14,000 square feet of ground floor non-residential uses in the northern phase, both of those being minimums. And it's trying to do a lot of things with that, but critically, it's trying to provide that type of mixed-use environment that would allow this to be, the type of thing that would be consistent with our TOD policies, provide the kind of environment that we would hope for and anticipate with, directly adjacent to a metro station. In addition to the non-residential uses, there is a range that could be provided, and this is could or may, of community or senior center uses. This 10 to 15,000 square feet of senior center, community center uses could be considered in lieu of some of the office development potential. This is a may. I think as all of y'all were on the task force looking at the Parker, one of the things that's been kind of critical in this area has been the need for enhanced community center spaces. And so this is something that would allow for that type of use to be considered on here. While we do recognize that there might be other sites that are within, kind of the proximity of the area that might be more advantageous. So this is a may, it's not a should. It's something that would allow it to be considered. All right, so on to the other uses. The next is 1,500 multifamily uses, including age and ability restricted housing, independent living in mid and high-rise building types. One thing that's been kind of critical for our discussions regarding TOD and what we think of as the appropriate level of density on a metro station site proper has been that use type and ensuring that the yield that's delivered with the buildings can really kind of maximize density where we really seek to concentrate it per our TOD policy. So we've added language in here discouraging stacked and traditional townhouses and noting that they should not be considered. One additional thing regarding the uses, as some of y'all might be familiar with, there is the ability for some of the non-residential uses within the land unit guidance to be converted to a hotel. There's an exact substitution ratio of 200 to 200 rooms with conference facilities for 250 dwelling units. So we've tried to generalize that. And Mark, I saw your comment regarding this in particular. I think that's something that we probably can and should take a look at in particular, is how, what's the benefit of having a 200 room hotel specified out here as opposed to some other number. So we'll take a look at that in particular. But it's one of those things where this would allow for office use, or excuse me, hotel use to be considered. We just want to make sure that when the numbers are accounted for, that we're ensuring that there's not something above and beyond those other use types in terms of total density, intensity, and that the impacts that might be that might be attributed to that switch can be accounted for in terms of transit ridership and transportation impacts.
And our only point was just the industry, for some reason, for 5 years, 50 keys is what they want. Something else, just keeping it more amorphous and doing exchange at the time would be probably better going forward.
Yeah. Okay. Before we move on, this is the land use section. There's additional guidance regarding phasing and some specific conditions regarding the land use concept in particular. But this is the land use program in the kind of the rawest sense. It gives you the total FAR, or not the total FAR, but the total intensity and total density that's attributed to the site. So this is probably the most foundational kind of aspect of the whole plan. So. Does anybody have any questions or any comments?
Yeah, why is it that you're putting the numbers in? I'm sorry. If you do this, you're stuck with 200 hotel rooms or 1,500 of the other. Can you not just put a range in there?
So regarding the 200 room hotel, I think that is something that we probably could take a look at in terms of removing that exact number. I think that's probably fine. Regarding the 1,500 multifamily units and the 382,000 square feet of non-residential, those were the maximum development potential figures that were requested with the nomination. And so there's always the ability to study additional intensity in the future, but this is what we studied in terms of potential impacts. The TIA is based on these figures, those kinds of things. So, we're all about TOD and high density and ensuring that we can mitigate the impacts of development is kind of the key factor. But these should be read as maximums, with the exception of the 20,000 square feet of ground floor retail and 14,000 square feet of ground floor retail in the southern phase and the northern phase, respectively, which are read as minimums. I got a hand up. Mary, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm confused about the affordable housing components. It seemed to say that only if 1,500 units are built would the 15% of affordable workforce housing kick in, and yet there's trade-offs here for a hotel already. That wasn't said earlier. Could you clarify what needs to be accomplished to get the 15% of the workforce development units?
Sure. So we would read the 15%, and we'll get to the exact discussion of affordable housing in a minute, but the 15% would be applicable to residential development that is that's under this option. So you don't have to propose 1,500 residential units in order to be held to the 15% standard. It'd be any new multifamily residential development that's under this option that's seeking to utilize this option would be held to the 15%. So if they come in, if a developer or multiple developers comes in and they do a 400 unit building, it'd be 15% of that 400 unit development. If they come in and do 1,000 units, then it'd be 15% of the 1,000. So it's not just if they max out, so to speak. It's a kind of proportion within it, as long as it's the types of units that are recommended here, and they're multifamily. So,
and those would be in line with the new guidelines that specify how many at different AMIs.
correct.
Although I don't think there was one that specified levels for 15%. They were at 8 and 12 and 20. So you'd have to create one for 15%.
Correct. So and we'll get to that in a later section, Mary. But you're correct. So this would be provided in line with the newly adopted income ranges. So 80% AMI and below, which is the new standard for rental. The current standard for sale is 120% of the area median income. And so the policy, so to speak, would be to reflect those WDU changes, but at that 15% commitment level. So,
okay, thank you.
Queenie?
Oh, okay. My question is in the same area where Mary is, and that is when you're talking about the 382,000 square feet of non-residential use, and it includes for medical or healthcare uses. Now, would that not require a special permit use of some sort because it's health related and medical?
I'm not sure about the exact entitlement that would be required to adhere to that, but the site would need to be rezoned for one. So I can get back to you about whether it's special permit, special exception, but in most cases, the whole thing would need to come in under a PCA or some type of zoning application to rezone and enable these types of uses. I don't know, Mark, if you have anything to add on that.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how to raise my hand here for a second. I just,
It's hard.
sorry. And I've got a kid coming back from the beach right now too. So got a couple things going on. What was the question? I think with regard to Winnie?
The medical use, the healthcare medical use, that if it's included in this square feet for non-residential use, to include uses such as medical or healthcare, would that not require a special use permit or of some sort? And as
yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Yeah, typically, this is right now we're in a mixed use zone, so you'd have to take a look at what the zone permits. Presumably, if a redevelopment comes in here, they may stay with the current PRM zone. They may rezone to a different TOD zone. I guess really what you do is look at, first of all, and typically those zones have a little more generous use limitations on those things. So you may have the ability to go through the rezoning to either get that use permitted by right, and you reflect it on your CDP, or you do it part of the rezoning, and then you maybe with that you would get a special exception. If it's a special exception use, get that approved concurrent with the rezoning to have that use reflected as well.
But would that be much more of a challenge for a developer or someone who would want to have that assisted living facility, because that's going to require a lot more attention, you know what I mean? So
Yeah,
I was just kind of wondering if would that be a discouragement or deterrent from folks?
I think, and again, we'd have to see, it's kind of depends on the facts involved. But, typically, if you're looking at doing a large rezoning, and we're talking about, you got a lot of, housing units, a lot of uses and stuff like that. Say it's a typical like 150 unit, assisted living facility, or, a nursing secondary care facility. They have certain amount of impacts, but those are frankly diluted in the overall scheme of what you're trying to approve. So it's probably actually easier, because you're actually kind of, getting a large neighborhood theoretically approved at the same time. Things you'd want to think about, in terms of noise, impact, traffic, access to nearby adjacent medical services and stuff like that. But those are kind of, you have to put it through the whole big process. But, I don't think it being an onerous obstacle, as long as you're doing it part of a large approval. Doing that by itself, probably not worth the effort by itself.
What are the chances you think somebody would want to have an assisted living facility in that particular land unit area?
We actually talked about it. I think frankly, I mean, look what's going on with the population alike. People need that. It allows people to age in place. My parents are, unfortunately, I'm in that situation right now with my parents. And allowing people to age in place and have those kinds of choices is nice. Okay. And it's all part of a neighborhood, really. I think it's certainly, I'm speaking on behalf of WMATA and South Antigua stuff. I think that's a use I think that we see as desirable, as part of a project like this, part of a neighborhood.
Oh, okay. I was just kind of like concerned, and particularly if there was even either a partnership with Inova, or would Inova feel that a developer was infringing upon their little kingdom?
And no, I mean, the most, from what and not to get too far down the rabbit hole, and I'm not
Yeah.
gonna speak for Nova, but I know, as medical care has changed a lot, Nova's got very specialized, and Nova tends to work in partnerships with the Sunrise communities, the Manor Cares, and like that, because they do separate things that Nova's kind of gotten out of. Nova gets into kind of acute care or something like that, but if you were to go get your knee replaced or something like that, and you go immediately to post-acute care, you're taken out of the hospital, you go to like a Manor Care for a week or two. And, so they tend to work in partnership with it. And side advertisement, Mount Vernon Chamber of Commerce is working on a presentation just about this healthcare in our area too.
Okay.
A very good program. So people text me or email me and I'll connect you into it. But it's going to be a really cool thing. Talk about the hospital, Belvoir Hospital, Inova Hospital, the big campus they're proposing up at Landmark, but side gigs.
Yeah,
But yeah, it's
that's
all
what I
good.
was looking at too. Okay, thank you.
Can I?
Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
Just 2 points I wanted to bring up was, in terms of the totals, I think we understand where you are with the totals. And in my comments, I'm not going to try and hijack this, but we had some questions about the minimums requirements, and that if we don't have a problem with the maximums, we don't see the minimums being too much of a problem either. But we go into in different areas of the draft straw man. There's a really good discussion about how you would weave these kind of uses in there, both the north and the south side, both in terms of urban design, scale, activation, adequacy of retail. We think, like, I guess I'm a little concerned when you have these minimums, because we don't know how things are going to evolve, and I think we'll probably easily exceed them, but you don't know how things are going to go. And it may be, if the goal is for activation of street front, the nature of retail and non-residential use is always changing. Maybe someone's not looking for that amount, they're looking for something lesser, but they want to have, a longer amount of street frontage to provide activation. So I don't know. And I guess I don't know what we get out of putting the minimums in there, other than the potential being a tripping point somewhere down the road that people have to address with either a comp plan amendment or something smaller down the road on that. The other thing was, if we go to the next page. And this is where the 1,500 multifamily units, I guess, first of all, I don't know whether that involves 1,500 multifamily units plus any density bonuses people do to affordable housing or not. But, that's probably a question for later on. But when we look at the second line, it says traditional and stacked townhouses do not provide sufficient level of density to support the TOD concept and should not be considered. I would generally agree with that. I think, what they do is they serve a function, and I put in our comments. For one community in particular, it might provide a valuable buffering and transition. Particularly where you have single family houses. I'm thinking about that people who are backing up on Biscayne, to have something where they can kind of scale up from their backyards, the trees, townhouses are stacked between there. And then, because you're going to have that access road right there anyway, and then you have additional buffer, then you can go for the mid or high rise there. So we're not, I guess we just suggest that perhaps that language be clarified a little bit. That probably be the only place I think it'd be appropriate or warranted, but keeping it as an option just to, frankly, take care of the folks at Huntington Civic Association and Huntington community might be less impacted to them. That was it. Thank you for your time.
Go ahead, Catherine.
I kind of agree with Mark. Somewhere in here, and I haven't read it in such excruciating detail, but we need to say things like transitioning, because we do that all along the highway, every place else, about you transition to the existing neighborhood so you don't destroy them. Have you considered doing that, please?
Yeah, a couple thoughts on it. One, I'll Mark, to your question about density bonus. We can talk about affordable housing later. This is exclusive of bonus. So
okay. Thank you.
The way that we write it into the plan is we really don't say anything unless it needs to be inclusive of bonus, and so that absence of language, it's exclusive. So consistent.
Given that the bonus is part of the comp, yeah, I figured that was the case, but clarification.
Sure. Regarding townhouses, so Catherine, to your question about kind of transition and compatibility, That particular development block is unusual, especially on the northern phase, because it's the only part of the site that could actually, with relatively minor changes, actually be implemented before the garage comes down. And so the northern garage could, is going to remain until it's reached the end of its useful life. And most of the redevelopment that would take place along Huntington Avenue would be commensurate with or kind of following the demolition of that garage. This one block that we've talked about, which is abutting Biscayne, where the concepts have shown townhouse development in the past, it's treed today, but it's relatively small in terms of its total size. One of the things that we've kind of thought about in terms of not just density and kind of what our expectations are for TOD on the site, but also in terms of what would the interim phase kind of look like for townhouses, and how would you have an interface of townhouses up against a street where you have a commuter garage immediately adjacent to it. It's just something that we have concerns about regarding kind of that type of transition, not from Biscayne, which is I know is one question about transition, but also to what does that mean for there to be a stick of townhouses, for example, immediately adjacent to infrastructure that is going to be there for the foreseeable future, at least. So that's a couple of thoughts there. But regarding your question about transition in terms of overall from the site to the Huntington neighborhood, we do have some recommendations regarding height in particular, which I think that the task force, I know Ellen was interested in that in particular, but we could talk about that and how that could play out regarding building heights as well as landscape buffer. Go ahead. Oh, Catherine, you're muted.
Is there a way to split your screen so you can have your language and show the map? Because it's a real pain in the neck to be bouncing back and forth and figuring out, even when we're reading this and what you emailed us. I think it might help if you can split the screen with the language as well.
I will do what I can. Here's that area in particular. Excuse me. 1 second. It's gonna be kind of messy, but here it is. Okay, I'm doing this on the fly, so I apologize.
That's okay. I think it's very helpful if you could continue to do that.
Sure, I'll do what I can. So the area that we're talking about is this area down here, and this is the development block that has been shown in the concept plans as being the townhouse, a townhouse block. One of the recommendations that we had that Dover Cole assisted with was looking at alternatives for this area. And so this is one of the locations, I think it was the location basically, that they had identified as being, if townhouses weren't something to consider there, their recommendation was that this would be an area that could potentially provide that type of 10,000 to 15,000 square foot community center. So that was kind of the alternative that we've kind of thought of as being probably the highest and best use of that space from a county standpoint.
And where is Biscayne on this? Please orient me, please.
Sure. Yeah, Biscayne is right here.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. I thought so. Thanks.
Yeah. And so a 10 to 15,000 square foot senior center, community center space is essentially 1 or 2 levels. And so that type of building, with that type of floor plate and building height, generally speaking, would be relatively small in comparison to the majority of the site, which is recommended for mid and high rise development.
Graham, who was supposed to operate? Do we know who was supposed to operate that senior center and construct program?
Sure. So
that may be more than we know at this point, but
yeah, I think it is more than we know. What we have, why we've included it was that NCS in particular has indicated that the Huntington Community Center, which is kind of off map here and located in Land Unit A, is small. It's small and it's relatively old. And so one of the comments that they've that they've provided has been that there is a need for community space as well as senior center space. So I don't know the details of who would own it, who would maintain it, who would operate it, et cetera. But it is a comment from NCS that they think that there's a need for additional capacity for that type of use in this general area. And so this kind of gets back to, you know, the may as opposed to the should, you know, it's in the language. And that recognizes that we had a similar recommendation for the Parker, for example, which is located in Laney at G, and that is also another potential space for that type of use as well. So we'll probably, you know, there's opportunities for that to take place in a couple of different.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Graham.
Any other questions or comments? All right. Okay, and I'll try to bring down my maps when I can after I go through the text, but okay. So regarding the mixed use options, so that land use program that I outlined in terms of residential and non-residential, most of the redevelopment that is anticipated under this option would occur in phases in both the southern portion that's envisioned to occur in coordination with or following the construction of a structured BRT station. So that's the BRT station that's tucked into the hillside that would be constructed following the demolition of the southern garage. And then most of the redevelopment, as I mentioned, would in the northern portion would also take place in coordination with the demolition and replacement of the northern commuter garage. And so one of the things that we had talked about at the last meeting was that parking demand study, which had it indicated that there may be a need for additional commuter parking capacity in the future. But we're probably about 15 years out from that time frame when redevelopment in the northern portion would take place. So the exact size of that facility is to be determined based on a parking demand study that would be submitted in the future. That influences the overall program, of course, with the northern phase, but we're 15 years out from being able to determine the exact mix of uses. So there's some unknowns there, but there's a flag here noting that that parking study would need to be submitted with any development application to ensure that we're right sizing the facilities, providing the commuter parking that we need, but also ensuring that we're not over parking. All right. Regarding the mixed use option, so we do have language in here noting that any redevelopment should be coordinated under one cohesive plan to include a mix of uses, both residential and non-residential within the southern and the northern phase in order to implement the vision for the site. Plans for the southern and the northern portions and each block within each portion, including any interim phases, should demonstrate how the full site can develop in line with the mixed use land use plan and provide the necessary infrastructure and amenities to serve each phase. All right, those are the last two slides regarding land use specifically. Any questions on those last two bullets regarding kind of redevelopment under the option and the phasing? Tim, did you have a question?
No, very helpful.
Okay.
And questions have been very helpful too.
Yeah, good discussion. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
All right, so on to urban design. So urban design in the transit development area, which is the area that you see on the map here, which includes landing at E, is recommended through a mix of plans. So you have 4 plans for the TDA. One is pedestrian circulation, one is open space and landscape buffer, one is building heights, and then one is land use specifically. All those are getting updated, and we'll provide those as soon as we can. But that will be the kind of the linchpin for a lot of these recommendations that will help to visualize some of the text in particular. So more to be discussed on that once those are available. But in general, a couple of kind of elements of this that are going to shine through as a part of those map modifications. In the northern portion of the site, activity should really be concentrated around a new civic plaza or other gathering spaces and along Huntington Avenue. And also in the northern portion along Huntington Avenue, you have a grid of streets that should establish a logical and walkable block pattern, enabling multiple blocks to be developed and walkability and the ability to have active ground floor uses within those blocks being kind of critical. In the southern portion, a large privately owned, maintained, publicly accessible civic plaza above that BRT station and adjacent to the metro station entrance would serve as the key central organizing feature. So as y'all probably remember from the discussions we've had on the concept plans, the concept showed the illustrative plan showed development blocks along North Kings Highway with the central plaza towards the rear. That's what we're referring to here, which is that civic plaza. And so that's adjacent to Metro Rail and directly above the BRT station. And then surrounding that plaza, you'd have transit-oriented mixed-use development that should be constructed with ground floor uses to really activate that space and enliven the pedestrian walkways and other public spaces. All right. On the parks and open space, kind of related topic, a variety of privately owned and maintained publicly accessible urban park spaces should be provided on the site for the benefit of residents, employees, commuters, the surrounding neighbors, visitors, etc. Pedestrian connections should be provided to nearby publicly accessible parks, Mount Eagle Park, Huntington Park, for example. And then we're recognizing that not all of the needs of the site and all of the potential impacts to park spaces and open spaces can probably be met on the site given the grade. So there would be other ways of mitigating the impacts, such as offsite contributions that could be considered for the specific site, given that the grade kind of really limits the ability for certain types of facilities to be constructed. Okay, any questions? Jason, go ahead.
Yeah, I had a question. It looks like in part of this that Mount Eagle could be developed. Is that true? Because on one of the other pages where it went over height limits, it showed that basically the line was cutting right through where the existing Mount Eagle is.
You're correct in bringing that up, and it's one of the things that we're fixing with this map, because this is an older. Believe it or not, this map that you see here is actually older than the development that's within it, and so we're bringing that line right along here to reflect existing conditions. So,
okay,
to answer your question, no, Mount Eagle goes in this full triangle area.
Okay, great, thank you.
Sure. Okay. Queenie, go ahead.
Okay, when you're talking about the parks and open space, and since everything is not going to be fully accommodated or provided, but you mentioned about off-site locations, how is that going to be maneuvered or handled? Is that through proffers or would, okay.
Yeah, exactly, and it'll be dependent on the total units that come in, the impact that they have in terms of square footage that's needed. So it would be handled most likely through proffers. Yeah.
Okay.
Lynn.
Yeah, you won't be surprised at my comment. First is I had to smile when you talked about how our comments had all been incorporated or you looked at them and such. And of course, my main one is how you get north and south together has been totally ignored in this subject. Secondly, you're talking about pedestrian moving around in the south and moving around in the north, and as if without the connection to make them work together. Then you've now come up with this new term, which is a high quality interparcel pedestrian trail. I dearly want whoever loves that so much to come over and have a walk with me some morning as I walk down the ramps of the middle parking garage. You get some idea of what that trail is going to be. Maybe for soapbox derby racing cars or something, but it literally makes no sense. And so when you talk about tying the place together, you talk about commercial ventures, it's still, I go back to the same thing as why the heck aren't you running a nice looking escalator with commercial beside it from the bottom to the top and the top to the bottom so you can move around. I mean, this is I've just wasted my time, but you guys are totally ignoring what is the critical part of this. From the very first meeting, you talked about the challenge of knitting together the top and the bottom. And now you say you're obviously just throwing up your hand and saying, we're going to have this nice little pedestrian path, interparcel, or whatever you want to call it. So in the first place, I think I've been wasting my breath. But secondly, I still see absolutely no solution that you've come up with for how you're going to tie the top and the bottom together.
So Lynn, we can get to the multimodal path in the section and talk about that in particular. It's not shown in this text right here, but I'd be happy to describe, kind of what our line of thinking is about how to tie north and south together.
That's fine. I didn't know whether to raise it later or whether to raise it now, but you keep talking about how you're going to make the top part all work together and the bottom part all work together, and totally ignore the most critical part of the whole operation, seems to me. Okay, I'll wait till later. Hear your explanation.
No, and don't think that we've ignored it. It's been the it's been the topic of a lot of discussion for 2 years, and it's a challenging site, and we've been challenged in terms of thinking about how to design a space that could work to get from north to south. So we've thought about this a lot, and we think that it's critically important. One thing that kind of going back to one of the comments that we had previously, which is redevelopment and having kind of one whole master plan for tying the whole thing together. Traditionally, these types of things can be faced, should be faced, commensurate with infrastructure. But I think that to your point, having something that early on describes how the site can work together from a zoning at the zoning level, how it can work together, for some of these elements, such as parks and interparcel and connectivity through the parcel. That's why we've included that's why we've included this, is so that it can be addressed and would be addressed. So
I'm Graham. I'm just totally serious that somebody should come and walk up and down the ramps to get a feel for what it's really like. You can't walk that up and down, and if you're, I can, and people walk it every day, but basically most people are not even going to want to consider walking up that incline.
Well, I vote for zip lines myself.
Yeah, they at least get you from the top to bottom. You can't get back up. Maybe you can have a trial, some kind of something to pull. But this is from the very first. I remember we had this discussion that this is a thing that people around the world seem to be able to solve. But for us, we throw up our hands and say, let's have a cutesy little path.
Sure. I've got a couple of hands up. Mark, do you want to go next? And we also have Mary.
Just real quick, and I won't take much time. And this may be answered maybe when you have the graphic available. When we talk about this, and we talk about also the multimodal discussion, and I remember from when we were talking about Huntington Club, initially there was going to be a pathway connection kind of near North Kings Highway, near where possible S3 is, and a pathway connection kind of coming from near Huntington, kind of out to where the park and ride is, kiss and ride, I guess it would be, is. But when I read this, and again, it may be answered when we see the graphic. I do remember there being a proposal for kind of a mid-block interparcel connection, and that would have been right where kind of you have the really kind of the conservation area where you have the really kind of the steep cliffs and the like, and really it would only serve the folks at Huntington Club who would be able to have access to the metro either from either 2A, and then it would be a security, maintenance, safety, real problem, and may possibly interfere with the conservation easement. And I would note, did that survive, or is that going to be? We're going to see that in there, and that kind of gets to the question of I guess we'll see it when we're there, but I think that really needs to be rethought, from a standpoint of safety, security, impact to the conservation easement. Frankly, who the population it's serving, and if the thing's even something like that's even really cost effective, or how practical it'd be to use it, because that's the steepest inclines in the entire property right there. But we're happy to take a look at that when we see the proposal come forward.
Sure. I'm happy to respond, Mark, in just a minute, but I want to make sure Mary gets a chance. Go ahead, Mary.
Yeah, I had a question on the Huntington Avenue map marker for the plaza. Isn't that the plaza that we filled in already with a new building up at the Parker? Is that still a plaza?
So the new plaza that was added for Land Unit G is adjacent to kind of the interim park. So there's the interim park space, which is built today, right? And so the redevelopment option that the task force voted on and considered and was adopted would allow for that parcel and those two parcels that can constitute the interim park to be built with residential. And so, and with ground floor, second floor uses. The plaza that you see there, that little, the green arrow or green star, excuse me, we might actually need to move it ever so slightly to make this more clear, because it's a good point. But that is just outside of the parcel line. And so that's that bulbed out area. I can show you the diagrams, but there's a bulbed out area that was going to be the new area for kind of a civic plaza. And it was thought of as being critical, given that you're immediately adjacent to Metro, to have that area, that corner in particular, be kind of celebrated and be an active area. So that was added by the task force.
Okay. So I'd like to see a cross country trail with possible escalators or lifts or something for people with disabilities to go through this area. I don't think you should have to be a hiker to get from one end to the other. But it would be nice, and I'm waiting for your proposals on that.
Well, to what we've proposed in the plan text, I just went ahead and kind of flipped down to the multimodal section. And so this is the section, to Mark's question as well as to Lynn's, regarding the interparcel trail. And so when we show figure 13, which is the interparcel connection, that's what we're describing, which is that connection from Land Unit I, which is the Huntington Club, over and then across the area that is currently under a conservation easement to about this point right here. And that's what we're generally speaking going to show. And so the purpose behind that is to tie these two, large transit-oriented development sites together. You have an existing cross easement trail that's shown right here. The conservation easement goes across and into this area already. So you have a trail that goes through and serves essentially the northern phase. For those of you that are familiar with the Huntington Club neighborhood redevelopment, it serves kind of that northern phase in the area closest to Huntington Avenue. And so with the plan amendment, one of the things that we've considered and studied quite a bit is how can you do a similar type of connection to serve the areas that are closer to the North Kings Highway frontage. And so in looking at it, one of the things that we have in one of the concepts, and I can flip to that if we want to, is showing a trail. And what that trail would do is incorporate landings, accessible landings, to ensure that we have places for people to be able to pause and to seek respite as they ascend that trail, because it is significant in terms of the grade change. I think it's about 40 feet from this point right here to here. And so there's a real need to ensure that it's accessible and that people can actually use it. I don't think it's an easy feat, but it is there's a significant grade change that needs to be accounted for there. I think another.
But Graham, I hear you saying that, and I understand what you're talking about there. I don't think it's feasible, but I hear you. But you're still not talking about how you get from Huntington Avenue to North Kings Highway. I mean, that's where we're building for all these people to live, and we want to make them one community. And I keep looking for how you're going to get those people together.
Sure. So the other part of it that's not shown here, but will be shown on figure 13, is what that ties into. And so hopefully, Lynn, when we got the maps, we can talk about this more, because it's not just that connection there, but we'll go into more detail once we have the map, and I can show it to you. I know it's hard to do this without a map, but so I apologize for that.
No. Thank you, Graham. When do they expect the maps to be available? Or
later this week. I'm hoping to be able to get it to everybody on Friday.
Okay, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
And I guess the last thing, and this is presumably permissible, because we see it in Tyson's. Like, if we're talking about having a series of publicly accessible, privately maintained parks and respite areas, you've got that kind of requirement to provide a certain amount of square footage for parks and a certain amount of square footage for open space, depending on the population and how it's done there. And I guess, ensuring that we have and this will be done to our rezoning, but that we have the flexibility to count some of that towards those, that space requirements, and doing that prior to, seeking offsite credits and the like. It's a very tight space, so.
Certainly. Yep, we could take a look at that and follow up regarding that.
Thank you.
Sure. Mary?
Graham, could I just ask one more question? I apologize for talking too much, but is my understanding that this week and 2 weeks from now is our last shot at this?
Yes, currently we have the 21st, which is the last one we have on the calendar. And so one thing, if we want at the end, we can kind of take a straw poll, see who's available for a potential carryover meeting, because I think there is a lot here, and without the maps, I think it is difficult to kind of visualize and see how it interacts with the text. So if the task force would like, we can propose an additional date. So that way we'd have 2 meetings to discuss. If that works for everybody. I see a need for it. I think that we've got a lot to talk about and a lot to synthesize, and so there might be a need to do that.
Thank you.
All right, Mary, I think I saw your hand up.
No, I took it down. It was left over.
Oh, okay.
I think we should have 2 meetings. We should plan it sooner rather than later, because people will go away.
I agree. All right. Okay, and so moving on. Following the open space and parks section, we do have language regarding building forms, active street frontages. And so one of the things that's really kind of critical for our TOD areas is achieving that type of urban form that can create, that vibrancy, that enlivened pedestrian experience, allows people to pass through the site, to stay on the site and enjoy kind of the amenities that are offered. And so we have language in here regarding kind of that urban form, and ensuring that buildings are brought up to the streets, that the building zones, kind of the areas where the public would be, incorporate the types of amenities and elements that would support an active public realm. So street trees, benches, wide sidewalks, spaces for outdoor seating, browsing, pedestrian scaled lighting, special paving, other elements that really can help frame that building zone. And then critical to that is having active street frontages. So retail and other service uses, we recommend, should be provided within multifamily and non-residential buildings, along major walkways. And so those are the main areas kind of that go along the site and then into the site, to really in both the northern and the southern portions to really have that pedestrian realm along the street. Any questions regarding building forms, street frontages? Okay, some additional language regarding buildings in particular. So we have language about building articulation, changes in building facades, ensuring that building articulation can really help reduce the scale of buildings, avoid monotonous building elevations, ensuring that we don't have long expanses of blank walls, for example, without windows, really trying to ensure that there's transparency to the buildings and that they're visually interesting. We also have language in here regarding service streets. So recognize that not every single street, within a grid of streets can be, the primary, walkable streets where you're encouraging retail. There is going to be a need for service and loading. So just noting that those should be interior to the site and clearly defined so they don't conflict with the goals for active frontages. All right, some language regarding ground floor uses. So we note that they should really meet the needs of commuters, residents, employees, visitors in the area. So different types of uses that they could be. So restaurants, salons, convenience stores, childcare uses, entertainment, etc. Noting that commercial restaurant uses in particular should be clustered and strategically located to produce that type of vibrancy and that critical mass of activity. take advantage of the traffic that's coming into the site and past the site, providing a destination not just for the people that live there, but kind of serving as the focal point of the Huntington neighborhood, and a destination for the area. And then we do have language in here regarding flexible uses. So one of the things that we've talked about has been that ground floor experience. I think we've heard in past meetings that there's changes in the retail market, and so one of the things that we wanted to include here is some flexibility regarding the exact uses as well as interim uses. So we have language about live work, pop-up uses that could be located on the ground floor, provided that the buildings are built with commercial use components to enable those spaces to be converted to their intended uses or kind of their long-term uses in the future. Any questions regarding? Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
I would just say this is I like this. This is well done, and particularly the flexibility for pop-up uses and flexible interim uses and the like. And I can kind of contrast that to my initial point about the minimums. It's just this is kind of talking about what you should be doing and what we're trying to goal for. I don't know the minimums making much contribute much, but I think the language here is really good.
Mr. Sargent.
Just wondering, I'm thinking of, you've got a lot of units here, and as I look at the scale, and I'm thinking of another application we received at the Planning Commission recently. It had public storage built in. Given the number of rental units you have, I would think that might be a component that might take on a life of its own, so to speak. Is that possible for consideration in the design? I mean, rather than have it scattered, having that kind of facility included, and I'm not necessarily looking at language for inclusion here. I was just curious about the design for this because it's a lot of units.
It is a lot of units. I mean, it's not something that we've thought of, frankly, in terms of what would be kind of the types of uses that would be envisioned here. I think that there's pros and cons to locating these types of uses, storage uses in in an activity center. One, generally speaking, they're not as they're not an industrial use in the sense that they've got noxious activities or impacts in terms of odor or noise, the kinds of things that you would typically associate with an industrial use. They're relatively low traffic generators, but they also don't provide much in the way of potential jobs. They're very much kind of service oriented, specifically geared towards the residential, as you mentioned. So we have seen it, in Tyson's, for example. There's a recent application.
That's what I was thinking of.
Yeah. So I don't know. We frankly haven't thought about it in this particular spot. I guess the one caution in my mind is, this is at Metro. This is on a Metro station. So is that the kind of use that we would want to encourage? Given that this is the one of the only spots that we have in the county for TOD. But if that's what the task force is interested in, we can discuss further.
No, it was just a thought. It's not like something that is essential, but to your point, it is TOD. It's a lot of units, and the convenience of storing things was a thought. Okay.
Mary, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say I like the idea of all these uses you've listed here, but a lot of these, like the restaurants and whatnot, and entertainment, it's really nice to have some kind of outdoor seating areas around those. So I'm hoping maybe you can design the public spaces around those buildings so that people have places to sit and kids can run around and stuff.
Absolutely. All right. Any other questions? Catherine?
Are you guys envisioning just a much larger version of Mosaic? Because if folks have never seen the Mosaic district, now that it's pretty much all built out, it's just fabulous. You know, outdoor play areas for kids and stuff like that, and shops, and it's really quite well done. The parking is hidden away. I mean, it's really nice.
I don't know the exact numbers on Mosaic, but it's the type of environment that we're going for. Even if the square footages are not going to be, similar, and therefore the actual, experience that you have of multiple blocks, down the stretch is going to be the same thing. 16 or 14,000 square feet along Huntington Avenue, and then 20,000 square feet. 20,000 square feet, for example, is about the size of a Trader Joe's. You might get a little bit more with a couple of additional spaces. So it's not quite on the same scale as say a Mosaic district in terms of a retail destination, but in terms of the feel of the place, absolutely. I think it's a pretty it's one of our best examples of the type of urban environment that we're going for. Commissioner Sargent.
Mosaic's a good comparison. I hadn't thought of that. Speaking of which, is there any data yet on the use of that shuttle through Mosaic from Metro to other parts of Mosaic? And would that be something that might be included in language? I mean, we've included it in, for example, in Tyson's in the past, shuttle type uses. Would that be comparable? Would that be useful? What are your thoughts? What are staff's thoughts, I should say?
I might need to defer to my my FCDOT colleagues on that one. Bob or Tom, go ahead.
Either one.
So the question is whether we would use something like relay from Dunloring and Mosaic in this area.
Yeah, just a thought. What do you think? Is it too soon? Is it not worth,
What would we connect?
It's a large area, and one, you've got a hilly area that we've heard a lot about, which might be.
You just mean like on site, like
just on site.
Maybe to solve the hill, the grade issue.
Yeah, just on site. Would that be? And I'll defer to you guys. Would that be useful for that site, or could it be?
We'd have to look into that. I don't know what kind of issue, whether it would have issues with that type of grade or not. I don't know if you would you want to be going up that grade in a driverless vehicle?
Not right now.
Maybe after a little bit more peace of mind with some more experience up there at Mosaic, but that's something we can definitely give some thought to.
How about an incline railway?
Oh, like in Pittsburgh?
Or Chattanooga?
Like a smaller scale?
Goes right up the mountain.
This is Stephen from Metro. Do you know what is the status of relay from like a commercial potential? Is it something that the county pays for that operation, or is this just like a research and development pilot? Or I know that it is limited in speed because now it's under some kind of unique law about vehicles that move so slow that like have a different licensing approach. Or
I don't know specifics, and Bob, if you know more than I do, please do chime in. But I think there are limits to what speeds the roads that it can go on. You wouldn't want to put it on a road with a 55 mile an hour speed limit. So I think it might be 30 or 35 miles per hour is like the maximum. But it sounds to me like what's being discussed now is like an on-site, not necessarily on road. We would create the paths for it.
But from like a commercial perspective, is that something that the county is paying an operator to provide that service, like bus service?
Oh, the full funding agreement, but the county is definitely invested in it. It is, I've heard it referred to as a pilot project. Yeah. But yeah, I'm sure the county is at least partially paying for the pilot project.
A thought is that you know, if you were to look at language, maybe something that says consideration of shuttle service may be considered for the future or something like that. I think it's just large enough, just enough terrain, and certainly enough residences to maybe be useful. I don't know.
Well, you
Just
can
about.
drive through the garage down to the lower level, so maybe it has some merit to that idea of saying
Yeah.
kind of like innovative use to get from north to south.
You know, it's something that staff may want to have some more discussions with before saying, hey, yeah, we can check the box with that or some, you know, and that's fine. I just, as we talked about Mosaic, it reminded me of that. And wondering, given, you know, the size and scale, whether it might be useful.
It is a really cool pilot.
Yeah, it is.
You remember the biggest issue was getting across Lee Highway, US 29.
Yeah.
But they were able to sync up the traffic signal, and they so I think it coordinates with the signal and gets the green light. But there was a little concern about crossing 29.
Oh yeah.
But I think they worked it out.
Yeah.
That's a good comment, Commissioner Sargent. So we'll take a look at it and get back to you with the
Okay.
next game. Thanks.
Sounds good.
All right. All right, building heights. And so this is one that we'll probably just need to save for with the map update. But in general, building heights are non-existent on most of the metro site today. So you can kind of see in terms of maximum building heights, you have kind of what I call the donut hole. And so the areas outside of the metro station proper do have building heights that are reflected on this height limit map. But because there are the redevelopment option that's in the comp plan today does not extend to this portion of the site, there isn't a height limit consideration. And so this changes that. And so we are adding height limits. So in general, it's a 200-foot height limit is what we're recommending. That would enable high-rise development, should it be kind of ready in the future. It's a maximum. A couple of things that we are including are an 85-foot element along the eastern portion of the property boundary, located just about right here. And so that is to provide a transition for the folks that live along Biscayne Drive. So you wouldn't have 200 feet up against a two-story duplex development. And then lastly, for those of you that are familiar with the Huntington Club redevelopment, there is a transitional height standard along North Kings Highway. And so we would be writing a similar recommendation regarding that transition. So you have what's called a daylight plane or a bulk plane that would allow for height to taper. And so at the property line, we're writing a 55-foot height limit, and then that tapers at a 40-degree angle up to 200 feet. So you have that transition, and that's owing to the fact that you have single family and duplexes in Jefferson Manor immediately across North Kings Highway. And so that'll be better explained with the map once it's available. But we do have that consideration for the transition, especially to those that are in areas that are in conservation districts that are planned to remain. Catherine?
I'm just typing something into the chat about getting from north to south, so y'all can just.
All right. Any other questions? We'll discuss more next time once we have the maps. All right, multimodal circulation. I'll just go over this briefly, but this is our considerations in terms of transportation across modes. So primary to this being a TOD area where we really emphasize the modal priority of the pedestrian and the cyclist, getting people to Metro. We are indicating that a network of pedestrian and bicycle trails should be provided, which will rely upon this updated graphic in the future to really connect the surrounding properties as well as the development blocks together into one network. So a couple of specific recommendations that we have are for a 10-foot wide shared use path and a minimum 8-foot wide landscape panel with street trees, and that should be provided along the North Kings Highway frontage to accommodate pedestrians and cyclists of all ages and abilities. So that recommendation came out of our active transportation planning efforts that we presented on at one of our earlier meetings, but I believe at the last meeting, where there were some specific recommendations regarding the width of those facilities. And so that's a change to our current recommendations. And then for the Huntington Avenue frontage, we note that improved bicycle and pedestrian facilities with streetscape should be provided along Huntington Avenue, including through repurposing the right-of-way inside the curb, such as the right turn lane along the site frontage. So for those of you that are familiar with the site frontage, there is a right turn lane as well as a currently a kind of a temporary bus lane. And so in the long term is for those that bus station to be relocated to the kiss and ride that's served by Huntington Avenue. And so that frees up that right of way for other purposes. And so we don't have an exact dimension or an exact facility that's identified here, but opening up that will allow for the type of uses or the type of facilities that can really kind of serve that Huntington Avenue frontage in the future. We've talked about the interparcel trail connection, so we are going to show that as a part of the updated pedestrian circulation diagram. And it would incorporate accessible landings at frequent intervals along the trail to provide respite and recreation for all ages and abilities. Okay, a couple of other considerations regarding multimodal. Should also include covered and secured bicycle storage facilities. There are some on the site today. However, with the redevelopment, the uses would also require secured bicycle storage. Enhanced crosswalks, and so that's another thing that we'll include with the updated maps, is showing enhanced crosswalks across Huntington Avenue and North Kings Highway, consistent with the diagrams that we've shown in the past. And then one other thing, I mentioned this previously, but the bus transit facilities that service the site should be consolidated to direct people to kind of the most convenient transfer locations. So people that are transferring between systems, bus, BRT, and metro, those connections to be physically kind of at the shortest distances as possible to enable convenient transfers.
Hey, Paul. Oh, did you send me the thing? Did you send it by email?
Steven, did you have a question?
Oh, sorry. No, I didn't realize my mic was on and talked to my kid.
Okay. All right. Any other questions regarding multimodal?
No.
All right. Environment and landscape buffers. So stormwater quantity and quality controls should be provided on site to reduce runoff volume and non-point source pollution. We note that the stormwater management facilities and measures should be sufficient to attain stormwater related credits in the most current versions of LEED certification or a third-party equivalent. So if that goal is not achievable, all possible measures should be implemented to the maximum extent possible in furtherance of this goal. Might work on some changes in terms of the exact language there to make that more clear. But the goal is to have stormwater facilities that can meet the stormwater related credits at LEED. And then unique in particular to Huntington, and this, by the way, this is similar language, if not the exact same language as what we have in the comprehensive plan for Huntington Club, which is immediately adjacent to the site. The next section, which is in bold here at the bottom, recognizes the conservation easement that's on the site today. It's there for stormwater purposes. It exists in that wooded western portion of the site between Huntington Club and Lamada. So I'm going to pull this over here so I can refer to it. So it's just noting that development in this area is enabled. And so one of the things that we had talked about previously was that S3 block, which is that area right here, which is a development block that would be kind of critical to tying together land unit I and land unit E from a streetscape standpoint. And so that easement area, portions of that easement area could be developed under this plan option. And then we do have language regarding offsetting tree canopy on site to the extent feasible with the trees that would need to come down as a part of that development. and restoring the tree canopy that's elsewhere on the site. For example, preserving some trees that are not preserved today, for example, to help offset the loss of the trees that would come down, as well as new plantings. Catherine, go ahead.
I have a real problem with the term where feasible when it comes to trees. As you all know, we're having a massive infill problem around this area, particularly in the Mount Vernon district in my community. And when you use things called feasible, developers will come in and say, well, it's just simply not feasible. And then county staff rolls over and puts their 4 feet up in the air and gives up. So personally, I'd like to see something less wishy-washy to say you will do the following, period, end of story. The other thing I'd like to see us do, and maybe it's here and I've just missed it, is when you do stormwater management ponds and things of that nature. I know that VDOT has agreed, if I understand correctly, to modify their ponds so they're not these ugly looking things with barriers around them, that they actually become an environmentally pleasing part of a community to enjoy and sit around, et cetera, et cetera. So are you recommending that sort of option for the stormwater management throughout this area?
We have language regarding kind of more general LID, low impact development techniques, but it's a good point, Catherine, regarding kind of the appearance and kind of maintenance and ensuring that these types of things are integrated with the development and not, you know, kind of an afterthought, so to speak, or an area that's kind of just at the back and just a hole in the ground. So good point. We can work on some language that kind of clarifies that intent and trying to incorporate it more into the design of the urban space. So good. And then similar comment regarding, you know, where feasible. I think we can work on some more precise language. Mr. Vianney. You're muted, sir.
Mute. Okay. Yeah. Related to Catherine's comment, I think, yeah, we do want to, extent we are replacing trees, we want to replace them on site. But there's the question of replacing trees, and there's the question of canopy calculations, because trees aren't always measured for canopy calculations. You have, and we've seen with urban forestry, you know, things that were permitted for canopy calculations a couple of years ago now no longer are permitted for canopy calculations. And so I think we certainly want to require to encourage tree planting on site. But I guess, you know, my question is, we also, given this is kind of an unusual site, very tight site, have the necessary flexibility so we don't have a situation where, yeah, you can plant that tree, but it's not counting towards canopy calculations when you're literally not going to have any other options, you know, on this. So I don't know how you do that, but that's something I could think of, you know, things that street trees aren't being counted now, you know, rooftop box trees aren't being counted now, you know, just something to think about in terms of how things, you know, change from regulatory discretion from one year to the next.
Thank you for that, Mark. Catherine, did you still have your hand up? Did you have another comment?
Oh, well, I hear what Mark's saying, and he's being a lawyer, and I love it. But the fact is, you can have your tree canopy calculation do something off-site, but it's vitally important to not turn these areas, even though you want density upon density, into concrete jungles. So there needs to some way be a requirement to make them green and pleasing and pleasant to be in. And trees and shrubberies and things like that do that. And I'll come back to the Mosaic District. They have that AstroTurf or whatever out in front of the movie theater area. Well, it's pleasant when the weather's nice. But once you hit 90 degrees, 85 degrees, it's pretty miserable. So nobody's using it. So we have to think about that as we go through this, so these don't turn into concrete jungles.
Just for the record, I agree with Catherine. I mean, we don't want to have heat islands. We don't want to have, I mean, We want to have trees, we want to have it green, we want to have it pleasant and usable. You know, we're just talking about a technical regulatory issue.
Okay. We can look at this specific language to, you know, to make sure that we're not doing something that's going to be, well, to make sure that it's implementable and that it's consistent with, you know, the language that we have, you know, in the PFM, the Public Facilities Manual, for example. The one thing I would say is that we do have a kind of a unique situation here regarding the conservation easement that, you know, is not necessarily anticipated as a part of just standard regulatory procedures. So I think that what we're looking for here is, you know, what are the impacts in terms of, you know, this area, which has kind of been recognized as a special area, and especially one that's, you know, in the midst of a lot of redevelopment. So we'll look at the language and see what we can do to be more precise, but also to, you know, ensure that the intent carries through. Mr. Sargent?
Just a question, would LEED cover the reference, would include potential uses of solar panels? I don't remember whether LEED covers that. You're going to have an awful lot of rooftop space from large residential scale sites to the metro site itself.
It would. This specific section is just dealing with the stormwater credits associated with LEED, but we do have another section down here, which is regarding just green building, just generally speaking.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll just jump ahead to that. So one of the things we are recommending is that the development would be expected to meet the criteria for LEED Silver or an equivalent program and provide innovative stormwater management techniques. So yes, LEED among many things, it does look at, you know, on-site generation, specifically solar in particular. So.
Okay, all right. I don't want to mandate it, but it, you know, it may be worth referencing, could include or something like that. Depending upon, so you've got some flexibility for the future.
Okay. All right. While we're on this one, the other kind of element to this EV charging is one thing in particular that, you know, this is a metro station, and so it's one of the things that, you know, is coming down the pike. It's more, you know, greater provision of EVs, and so we do have a reference in here regarding EV charging stations having at least 2% of the proposed parking spaces with the redevelopment being EV. I'll go ahead and just talk about affordable housing. So one thing that we've talked about in the past is the total commitment for affordable housing. And so the TDA, which is the map that we've shown here, has guidance and has had guidance for decades, actually, that note a 15% commitment to affordable housing. And so that's inclusive of land unit E, but it's all of the transit development area has that recommendation, except for the metro station. And so that the adopted plan has an explicit exemption from that 15% requirement, and instead has language regarding the ability to, in lieu of providing that 15%, to be able to adhere to the ADU ordinance. That language predates the WDU policy. Excuse me, sorry, my screen blanked out for a second. That language predates the WDU policy that was adopted in 2007. And so one of the things that we've looked at with the WDU ordinance update that we did a year and a half ago has been, should that change? And so one decision that was made with that WDU policy change a year and a half ago was that the 15% for the TDA should be retained. And so we're proposing that this site in particular, land unit E, inclusive of the changes with the 80% AMI being the new ceiling for rental WDUs, be 15% commitment level at 80% and below for rental and 120% and below for sale. So that is a change compared to the adopted comprehensive plan, but is intended to make it consistent with the TDA wide guidance. And I'm on the wrong slide. I apologize. So for whatever reason, my screen blanked out. It switched slides on me. I apologize. So, Mr. Vianney.
Yeah, just our comments are in the document, but I think, first of all, obviously everybody supports, provision of affordable housing, workforce housing. And I guess one of the things, and this is, I'll speak about this site particularly, but I think it's also maybe part of a larger conversation within the county, as we kind of start looking towards new and more innovative investment vehicles for people to start, promoting affordable housing. And right now, I'm thinking most immediately, we've got Amazon's been looking at this part of their fund. When they're looking at these things, what they're doing is they're looking at where can they spend their money to be at the biggest amount of impact. And so they go, okay, we're going to go to this area because we can afford to do this amount of units, and this is above and beyond what the requirement is. And so in certain areas, although I think the 15% is well intended, and I think we want to try to achieve that 15%, by putting it up at 15%, in some ways we work against our own interest, because if the thing is at a lower level and you're able to lure someone to come in and you get yourself more attractive for a financing entity, and then you say, okay, we're going to be hitting the minimum standard, which may be 12%, but we're actually going to provide more than that, maybe 15%, maybe 18% of the total area, and maybe doing it as part of one big project for the entire thing. You're able to lure those kinds of investors in there and, kind of put yourself in more of a pole position when it comes to competing for those funds. And so we proposed, consideration of that, and also looking at that from an opportunity, perhaps you can aggregate all the ADU or EdWD requirement in as an option, a standalone development that would, maybe standalone development, maybe at a lower requirement, but then, those folks are naturally going to want to come in. They're going to want to build something bigger, and you'll be able to get the finance for it. And ultimately, in a way, you're basically achieving what you wanted to get in terms of the total amount of ADUs and the percentage thing, but you're just making yourself more attractive for those kinds of investors and those kinds of investment vehicles. And the last thing is, that somewhat agrees with, those are here. WMATA has a policy about how they handle these things as well. So I'll let that go. We've got 5 minutes left, so I'll shut up.
Yeah, I can give a quick highlight on the metro policy for affordable housing. We're absolutely supportive of jurisdictional goals. One of the key things, though, we recognize Metro is not an affordable housing agency. So we have to work with our jurisdictional partners to figure out the financing plan for providing affordable units.
Mary, did you have any
Yeah.
questions?
So, representing South County Task Force, which is promoting equitable development along Route 1, I would think 15% is really a minimum for a metro station. We've been lowered to about 8% now in most areas, with a little bigger emphasis on the lower cost units. But for a metro station, you really have to go 15%. Tyson's Corner is 20%. And putting a metro at 15 is not a big stretch. Amazon can go 18, 20 if they want, but we got to stay with 15 for a metro.
Yeah, and that's where that key point is working with the county to identify those funding sources and pursue those funding sources to achieve the jurisdiction's goals.
Mr. Sargent?
Just to the point of 20% for Tyson's versus, a minimum of 15 here. Tyson's came with some additional development density standards, didn't it? That may not be applicable here.
Mm-hmm.
Correct. I mean, chief among them is you have unlimited FAR. If you're within a quarter mile of the
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, I mean, the change here is kind of it's the reverse of what we would normally do, but and I mean that because we're not actually changing anything relative to the TDA's guidance for the broader area here. This is to make the site, which currently has a kind of an opt-out or a lower recommendation. There were ADUs and WDUs that were provided as a part of the implemented option today. So I want to make that perfectly clear that there has been affordable housing that's been a part of the plan today, and it has been implemented. But it's a lower commitment level than what the rest of the TDA has in terms of the policy plan, or excuse me, the area plan. So this change of going to 15% is intended to make it consistent with the area guidance for the TDA.
Yeah.
Mr. Biani?
Yeah, Graham, I'm just saying, to be clear, no, we're not trying to get less than 15%. We're trying to make ourselves more attractive to the investors that are going to try and fund these projects. And particularly, there are a certain subset of investors that are looking to fund these things in concert with metro locations and the like. And they're looking as part of their investment priorities, they will say, where can we invest where we can have the biggest bang for our buck, meaning we can invest and exceed the applicable threshold. And so if you say the standard is otherwise 12%, and we're saying, well, now it has to be 15%, and we've now basically artificially increased the requirement by 25% and put ourselves at a disadvantage to another site. Say there's a site in New Carrollton that's also at 12%. You know, that New Carrollton site is going to score better than our site. Then when you actually fund the project, you can fund it, again, we're talking about a minimum. These projects are looking at coming 100%. You think about if you have 1,500 units here, 15% of that is going to be, 225 units? 12% is going to be 180 units. You think about the nature of the affordable housing project, like you could easily do more than 225. You can only end up netting more than that. So our goal is not to not get that 15%, is to make ourselves more attractive for those kinds of specialized investment vehicles. So I'm just saying, perhaps as part of our language, we could have an option for those kinds of things. It would be a lower standard, but maybe a higher unit count or something like that. That's all we're trying.
Mark, and I appreciate that. Could you? So I know that we've talked about kind of the potential for an Amazon type of development, and that's been something where they've been investing in metro stations around the region. Is there? Do they have like a term sheet or something along those lines that kind of spells out how this works?
Maybe it's worthwhile having a separate conversation, not to bore everybody here, but what we're saying is we can back it up, and show you.
I don't disagree.
Yeah, we're trying to show you how the goal is to make the site more attractive for this kind of investment.
And I think it would be helpful, I think, in terms of if we're looking at options for the language, it's awkward in trying to anticipate one specific type of situation,
right?
And because we're setting general policy for the development of the site. So I think the task force would want to, take a look and see what we have there as well. So I think it's worth
and that's what we're just saying, maybe as an option, in that kind of circumstance, should that vehicle come along. But we'll have a follow-up conversation with you on that.
All right. Okay. I know that we're almost out of time. I've got, I think, just one more slide, believe it or not. So I want to make sure we get to that. Two more slides. So I'll be brief. Parking. We are recommending that parking be provided both on street and in parking structures. Parking structures, and this is parking structures associated with the development blocks. So not metro operations. They're already developed. Parking structures should be provided below grade, or if provided above grade, should be wrapped with buildings. Any exposed facades should be located along service streets and away from main pedestrian walkways, North Kings Highway and Huntington Avenue, and should be designed in an attractive manner. And then loading areas should be located away from North Kings Highway and Huntington Avenue and the major pedestrian walkways, which will be identified specifically as specific areas on our TDA maps once they're updated. Questions regarding parking? And then lastly, land unit F. So land unit F is developed with, this is the implemented plan for both land units E and F minus Abington. So Mark, I saw your comment regarding where should Abington go? Should it go in E or F? And so I think that's worthy of discussion since it's being implemented as we speak. So we can talk about that. But currently, the way that we've split it off, we would bifurcate the recommendations. Currently, land units E and F are one recommendation, 850 units, 250,000 square feet of office, 30,000 square feet of retail. And so in doing this new mixed use option for the metro site in particular, the idea is that you would have an option that is only applicable to areas that have something else to implement, so have additional land. And so the areas that have been implemented in the past under the previous option, the courts at Huntington and pavilions at Huntington Metro, since they've been implemented, those can be in their own land unit at this point. And so this just recognizes them as being there, and then that also we would draw it so that land unit F would also contain Mount Eagle Park. And to Jason's point, we'd clean this area up in terms of the plan image so that it's shown as open space and park space throughout the rest of that land unit. And that's all I had. That is the comprehensive plan. I've got a couple of kind of the illustrative images and everything, but that's it. We have a lot of text here. Again, this has been a great discussion. I've really appreciated everyone's input. This is not the end. We would appreciate taking, if you can, take the time, read the whole thing. Send me your red lines if you'd like. I can send out a Word document if you're interested in doing it that way. Otherwise, feel free to just send me your comments. We'll take them. I'll do a comment matrix, which shows kind of what the comment is, and then if there's a need for a staff response, I'll include that, and then show how it's reflected in the text in the revised draft. So we're hoping to do that in the next couple of days, but we'll also send out the maps once they're available, so that you can read the whole thing all together as a package.
Are we going to discuss the 27th and the 28th? I can tell you on the 27th, there's an infill meeting that Dan Stork has set up. So a couple of us won't be at the 27th, but I think we need a few more days to figure this all out and get good comments to y'all.
I would agree with that. I can make either date work, 27th or 28th. So up to the task force.
What dates are those again? 27th is
June the 27th or June 28th?
Yeah, I can do 28, not 27.
I can do the 28th.
All right. Anybody else have any conflicts with the 28th?
I can do the 28th.
Looks like I can do the 28th. Check with Walter.
Okay. All right. And Mark and Neil and Stephen, if y'all could check your calendars, let us know if you can meet that date. We'd appreciate it. And let's mark it as tentative for now. I can send out a doodle poll. If that date doesn't work for the majority, then we'll look for another time. But we'll mark it as tentative for now and get back to everybody.
Graham, I'm fine with the 28th too. I'm a little shaky on the 21st, but we'll see what happens on that one.
Okay.
28th,
Go ahead.
the 27th, I know we have the manufactured housing task force meeting. So that's bad for them, for a number of us. 28th, I will actually be with my daughter at orientation at Penn State, but I can either sneak away for a little bit of that, or Neil will be here or someone else on our team. I'm sure we can accommodate it.
This could be a real learning experience, Okay, well, I think that sounds good. Landscape design, architecture, we've got her covered. Are there any other further questions, comments? Well, Graham and all, I think this has been a very, very productive meeting. Thanks very much and from the task force, thank you all for incisive questions and thoughts, and a strategic approach to the site is very much appreciated. You can see it evidenced in what we've been discussing. So,
Tim, could I ask one further question?
Sure. Okay. Go ahead.
It's kind of what we are supposed to be doing. I mean, we've got your recommendations here that we go through. And then is the final thing is going to say, well, most of what they're doing makes sense, but this is a pile of stuff that we don't want and we don't like it at all. They left this out totally. I know you guys would like us to say we're 100% behind it and it's perfect, but I just don't understand what you're expecting out of us in the end of the process.
It's a great question, Lynn. So what we strive for with the straw man is consensus between staff and the task force. So this was the initial draft. This is before anyone on the task force has been able to, see anything written down. So this version is intended to be attacked, hence the straw man. And so we take it, we revise and resubmit based on the feedback that we received, both from the task force as well as the comments that we received from marketing and the Lomata team. So what we do is kind of in that interim, we'll go back, we'll do the follow-up as we need to regarding the suggestion regarding the shuttle. But we'll do similar types of discussions with our environmental planning folks, run the ideas that we hear back to them to ensure that we've got sufficient policy support for the ideas. If there's things that task force wants to see that we can't support or that we would recommend against, we'll identify those, and so we'll put them in a box in the text, and we literally put them in a box. And so we'll have the task force version of this text, and then staff's usually we do it is we put staff's comment actually in, so kind of the reverse of what I mentioned. And so that way, if there is a difference of opinion, it's highlighted and it's explained. But if there's specific comments along the way, we want to incorporate, and we think can be incorporated, we absolutely will. And so we strive to make sure that there's as little difference as possible between staff and the task force.
Lynn, I think having a meeting on both the 21st and 28th is going to be very much appreciated to work out these issues.
Yeah.
Well, but the other point is, just like we did on the Verizon site, if the task force decides we don't like X and we have our own opinion, all of this stuff is going to have to go before the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors. So one of us would stand up and testify to say, we disagree with staff for these reasons, just like you, Lynn. Let's say we all vote with you to say you've got to have a zip line closed to get people down and up the hill, or whatever the case may be. Then that's what we testify for, just like we did before.
Which the Planning Commission will appreciate. If there are, significant differences of opinion there, it'll be helpful to hear it. So I think Mark had a question too. Mark,
you're muted.
Off mute, yeah. First of all, I just want to say on behalf of the Lomata team and stuff, I want to thank the staff for all their hard work. I know this has been a lot of effort over the last couple of months working on this, and to put something out like this and then get a bunch of comments and stuff like that. Please understand. We appreciate all you do, and in the effort. So I hope it's taken in that spirit. And also, I'd say the same thing to the members of the committee, and frankly, the folks who aren't on the committee, but the regulars that kind of show up here. And so we look forward to continuing to work with that. I think it might be helpful just because there are a lot of folks that are involved in the adjacent communities. And I think folks from the Mount Vernon Council too, for maybe staff or maybe Tim to kind of explain the process going forward. Right now you're dealing with the group, but explain at what point will they, this is happening in June. A lot's getting done between now and next month. Most committee meetings meet at once a month. I actually was at Groveton Civic Association on the site. That was their last meeting until September. If people start getting concerned that they won't have time to review and respond to stuff, if we could kind of explain how the process goes and how those folks might, get their organizations might put their word in, and also the Mount Vernon Council, and if there's like a presentation that's going to be to the council on this.
This is something that's a valid point. This is something that certainly can work out not only with Commissioner Clark, but also Supervisor Stork's office as well, to make sure his community is heard.
Yeah, absolutely. And to those that are on the call that are from the surrounding communities, you are more than welcome to attend these SSPA task force meetings and provide comments. Read the materials. They're on our SSPA website. Aaron, if you could put a link to the track and plan amendment website into the chat. That way you can review the materials. But these are public meetings, so we always take public comments. But in addition to these meetings, as Commissioner Sargent indicated, we can talk with Commissioner Clark as well as Supervisor Smith, Supervisor Stork about community outreach moving forward. The one thing I note is that the planning commission, we don't have a specific date identified for the planning commission at this point. We're constrained in terms of the summer because of the August recess. But we do anticipate if we kind of keep the schedule that we've identified, even with the modification with the carryover, we anticipate that we most likely be going to the planning commission in September. So there's additional opportunities for public comment at the planning commission. And then following the planning commission, there's a public hearing at the board. So there's a lot of opportunities to weigh in and provide comment on this plan. You're welcome. Thank you, Aaron.
Queenie, do you have a question?
Yes. When Aaron sends out the meeting reminder, as well as you, Owen, it would be helpful to me if I have the meeting link included in the reminder instead of my having to go to the website, scroll down, you know, and because it takes a lot more time, but it's doable, but it's not efficient.
We can do that. I think what we've traditionally done is send out calendar invites, but we can also send out something in an email that contains the link. So no problem.
Just, you know, the calendar invites are extremely helpful for me because I can find it, you know, all the time. I scroll through, you know, reams of email, and it doesn't always, you know, I can't always remember what it was, but the calendar invite's very helpful.
Yeah, I'm
Well,
texting.
that's kind of true, except if you don't use Outlook on your computer, and I don't, so it never goes anywhere.
Well, I have Outlook on my county iPad, but I also have Google Gmail and their calendar, so that goes on there too. Just,
you know, it's Ellen and I can't get it that way, so it's
Okay.
not gonna offload. When I accept it, it doesn't offload calendar on the iPhones. It just doesn't
Okay,
work.
all
So
right.
you've got to be a little more accommodating for those of us who are in, you know, Neanderthals.
No, we're tech challenged. So having the link in the email is extremely helpful.
You'll get no pushback from us. We can do that. There's no problem.
Don't disagree.
We can do that, no problem.
No problem.
Yeah, because
Okay.
look at how long it took me to get on.
We're glad you came.
Well,
So
are
I
there any
make
other
a
questions or comments, or
Motion that we adjourn.
do I hear a second? Okay, I got 2 fingers up. Perfect. Thank you all very much. Appreciate everybody's time and input. Thanks very much to staff. You guys were great. Really appreciate the detail and thoroughness. And we look forward to talking to everybody later this month.
All right.
Thanks very much.
Appreciate it.
Good
Thank you all
night.
for your time and great comments. Really appreciate it.
Bye-bye.